Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today we're going to be going over my April reading wrap up. So this is going to be kind of more like a quick type of review. If you're here for long form like thoughts and in-depth discussion, definitely check out my reading vlogs, which are almost exclusively me talking about books, very little personal life. So if that's your thing, if that's what you want, more discussion about books, that's the place to go to find those. So this is just going to be me going over the books that I read. A lot of these books, not all of them, but a decent amount of these I did vlog, so let's just get into it. So the first book that I read is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I will admit I went into this with very high expectations. This is a contemporary romance, and honestly, I heard very little, I think pretty much almost zero negative opinion or thoughts on this. So I went into this with my expectations sky high, and I was pretty disappointed, not gonna lie. I don't think this is a bad book. For me, I did not see the hype with it at all. Like, it didn't hit me emotionally, and I think that was for a couple of reasons. I do go into detail about why I felt like that. I gave this book 3 stars. It's essentially about our heroine. She's very close with her aunt. Her aunt dies, leaves her this apartment. The apartment allows you to travel back in time. Sometimes it's very sporadic. You never know really what's going to happen. She ends up traveling back in time and meeting this guy who is a chef that she falls for, and then she worries that she's never going to see him again, but then years pass. Obviously, she comes back to the future, present time, and she does meet him, and things go from there. So this book was surprisingly not really going deep with the emotional and the hard-hitting themes that I was kind of expecting it to. And I will say there is a trigger warning in this for suicide, which I had literally heard no one mention before. It's not graphic, it's not, you know, graphically detailed, you don't see it, but it is mentioned and it is a key part of the plot. So I just sort of feel like if you're going to include a very heavy theme with that, not only do you need trigger warnings, but you also need to really handle that with a lot of care. And to me, that element of it felt very gimmicky because it is all wrapped up in the 7-year slip. So I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth for this book overall because of that, and I also just didn't feel like the relationship felt real to me, so 3 stars. The next book I read is one of my favorites of the year. It is Say You'll Remember Me by Jiminez. I absolutely adored this book. I gave it 6 stars. This is, at the time that I read this was like my favorite romance that I had read this year. I have since, in the month of May, read a few others that were also 6 stars. I just was completely blown away with this book, and I am a big fan of Jiminez. I do really like her writing style. I like her writing voice. I think she does a really good job of incorporating heavier emotional themes and keeping it light and romantic and a little bit sexy. So I do really like her writing style, at least with the books starting from Part of Your World. I haven't read her earlier books. I've only read the Part of Your World series forward. So I've read all of those, I've enjoyed all of them, but this one really feels like it stands alone. This one is also very, very heavy. It deals a lot with grief and the grief of losing a parent to dementia. The heroine is basically a social media manager, like she does the marketing campaigns for like a mustard brand. And her mother has early onset dementia, and so at the time this book opens, she's living in the same town with the hero. The hero is a vet, he owns this vet practice, he is literally the perfect man, honestly. Like, that's something I love about Jiminez, both love and kind of sometimes I get bored with it, but this one really worked for me because he felt different. She gives her hero so many excellent qualities that you would really want in a partner. Like, this man is a complete simp for her and would do anything for her, but he's also just such a stand-up good person and not weak at all. Like, he's just amazing. So they actually end up meeting at the vet clinic when her little kitten that she just recently adopted is discovered that it has no butthole. And so he's like, hey, there's a very expensive surgery you can do to fix your little kitten, but there's no guarantee. So he's like, we should just put it down. And not knowing that he literally just saved a dog from being put down just a few pages earlier, she's like, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to save this kitten. So she goes to social media using everything she knows. She starts a GoFundMe, gets all the money, has surgery on the kitten. It's saved. Everything is great. And then she brings him back to the vet for a checkup. And that's when things really start to pick up in our romance. And I think that this had such great build up to their romance, even though it sometimes did feel a little bit insta-lovey. I do feel like it worked because I think you could just tell the way that Abby was writing this, at least for me and my point of view. You could tell from the moment these two met there was something about them that they recognized in the other person, like something about, this is my person, I know this is someone who's meant for me, and it just really, really worked. I loved seeing them go through life, work through their struggles, never giving up on each other, and being there for each other every single moment. It was absolutely beautiful, but again, very heavy with the theme of grief and an aging parent with dementia. Like, of all of the books that I've read of Abby Jimenez, this is by far, and again, I've only read from Part of Your World on, this is definitely the heaviest. Like, heavy, heavy, heavy. So be prepared to go into that, because this is not a light and breezy rom-com, although it is also funny. So the next book that I read is Firebird by Juliette Cross. So this book has been on my radar for a while. This is a adult romantasy from Juliette Cross, and this is, I believe, her debut with Tor. So this was published by Bramble. This is essentially about Roman, a reimagined version of Roman history, and he is a dragon shifter, and she is essentially like a witch, but we don't fully know what her powers are or what they're going to be yet. There is some problems with, like, warring between their kingdoms. She is actually bought as a slave by him, and so that's how the romance develops. It's very much a master-slave dynamic. So I will say that this is definitely not my favorite Juliette Cross book. I initially gave this 4 stars, but honestly, like, I really, really do like Juliette Cross's, her Stay a Spell series is a series that I really love. But this book, while a lot of it was a very easy read, I feel like it still has Juliette Cross's voice coming through really well. And the hero is 100% the type of hero that she writes. Like, he's a cinnamon roll with the heroine, but an alpha with everyone else. Like, this man literally is so sweet and good to the heroine. It's just absolutely, that was the best part of the book for me, for sure. So yeah, I think that I would probably keep my rating at a 4, but it's probably like a 3.5 rounded up. So it was not my favorite from her. Okay, so now the next book that I read is The Scattered Bones. So this is a adult romantasy as well. This is one that's been on my radar for so long, and I just never got to it because the premise of it sounds absolutely amazing. I believe this is like a Euripides retelling, Orpheus and Euripides retelling, or like inspired by that, maybe not retelling. So basically we have our heroine who was in love with her man, and things happened. She wasn't supposed to fall in love. She wasn't supposed to be with a man. And so as punishment, he is actually killed in front of her, where his body is like dismembered and all of the pieces are scattered throughout the realm. So she makes a deal with death that he's going to help her find all of the pieces. And if she does, then he's going to bring him back to life. So this honestly sounds amazing, right? Because I think that initially the synopsis makes you think, so is the guy that she's going to go find all his parts, is he her love, or is it death? Like, what's happening here? I'm intrigued, you know? And so I feel like the potential for that was pretty great, but it ended up being pretty unsatisfying because it's not what I wanted it to be. And I did like the character of Death. I think he was by far the best part of this, but I gave it 2 stars because this just felt so disjointed. This felt like poor storytelling. The timelines, part of this book, we're watching her fall in love with this man that she's risking everything for to get his body parts back together to bring him back to life. So we're watching her fall in love in the past, and then we're put into the future as she's going to hunt these pieces down. And I think that that is, I mean, on paper, that seems like a good way to tell this story, because you need to know the stakes of why she even cares to find this man's body and bring him back to life. Like, you need to feel the love between them, but you also need to see the part of her trying to get his body part. So I think that, like I said, like on paper, that works, but it didn't actually work here for me because it just felt so disjointed. This was a very like scene by scene type of storytelling where there wasn't really a cohesive thread, and I think that was mostly due to the time sequences that we had. They just didn't quite work. But I also just sort of feel like the moments that we had with them falling in love were so subpar. They were so diluted. I felt like all I was hearing about were these like trying to be poetic descriptions about how much she loved him and how much he loved her, but we didn't actually get to see it. So even though we had these scenes going back where we were supposed to be watching them fall in love, all we really got was talking about how in love they were. And that's just not enough for me. So I was disappointed with this. I gave it 2 stars. Okay, so now the next one was a good one. This was Wooing the Witch Queen. This was really cute. This was very cozy. This is something that I wasn't really sure what to expect. I have a physical copy of it over there, but I gonna just put a picture in right here. I grabbed this at Barnes & Noble because I think the cover is beautiful. It had sprayed edges. It just looked like so much fun, and I just was like, oh my gosh, I hope that I love this. So this actually is an author I've read before. I've read and recommended her on my channel years ago. She was writing romantasy before romantasy was actually booming, and one of her books called Snowspelled is really super fun with a winter kind of steampunky fantasy romance type of thing. So I really like this author's writing style, and I feel like she is very well suited to the cozy genre, the cozy romantasy genre. I did really like that we have our heroine, who is the Witch Queen. She's got some conflict going on within her about like actually managing and ruling her realm, and then we have our hero who is in disguise, and he is supposedly from another kingdom, and watching them fall in love was really fun, especially because they didn't really know who the other person was, and I just really honestly enjoyed this. It wasn't super memorable, as you can probably tell from the way that I'm describing it, but I did give it 4 stars. It was fun, and I definitely want to read more from this author because it was just a solid read. It was fun, it was engaging, but it wasn't one that necessarily is going to stick with me, you know. The next book, however, is a book that I really, really loved. This is Morbidly Yours. I gave this book 5 stars. I honestly enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. So I have had my eye on this from the time that it was first indie published. I heard somebody talking about this back on Twitter when it actually was Twitter and not X. And the premise like hooked me, and I was so intrigued with this. So we have our heroine who is she's a widow. She has come to Ireland. She is an animator. She's going to work at an animation studios to make an animated film. And she's kind of running this group of people there. And then she is next door neighbors with our hero, who is a mortician. And what the opening scene happens when she mistakenly has a bunch of body bags delivered to her door, and she's like, oh my gosh, who would order this many body bags? Like, that has to be a joke, right? And she sees the address is meant for next door, so she goes over there. That's where she meets our hero, who is indeed a mortician. And she's like, oh my gosh, what joke are you going to do with all these body bags? And he's like, actually, I need those 4 bodies. And it was just like, I feel like the balance of morbidity and also even like reverence for death and his profession was really well done in here, especially because this is largely a rom-com. So I felt like the balance between those, which could be very, very difficult, was pulled off incredibly well here, because you have great emotional development between these two, because, you know, he is actually asexual, which I also really love, because I can't even think of a male character that I've read that is asexual, and I just loved that, because not only do we get to see him fall in love with her emotionally, but we get to see him realize those sexual feelings for her that he maybe hasn't felt for anyone else before, like beautifully done, chef's kiss. And for her part, you know, she came from this marriage. She feels a lot of guilt. She feels a lot of grief for losing her husband. And she kind of struggles to be upfront with the hero about that. So I enjoyed this immensely. This is definitely an author that I will be reading from in the future. I am very excited to see what else she comes out with. I actually don't know if she has anything else or if this is her only book. But yeah, this was amazing. I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars, and it was fantastic. Okay, so now the next book that I read is Iron Flame. I am going to continue this series. I like this one a lot more than I liked Fourth Wing, I will say. This had a more cohesive plot. There was less info dumping in here. I did like the tension between, like, the political conflict that's happening in here. I liked the complexities that were developing within the relationship. I thought this was a lot of fun. 4.5 stars, rounded up to 5 stars. So I liked this one a lot. Okay, the next one is Much Ado About You by Eloisa James. Sorry, I got another text and it covered up my phone while I was looking at my screen. So Much Ado About You is the beginning of a historical romance series that I've heard a lot of great things about, and I really, really enjoyed this. I think I gave this book 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read for me, but it was seriously so enjoyable. I love Eloisa James' writing. Her author voice is so strong and clear and crisp. I just think she's an excellent historical romance writer. This book, I think the only reason I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars is because there was a lot in this book that was built up for future books. So we have a lot of sibling relationships happening here. We see a lot of the men that they are, you know, going to be eventually paired up with, we think, and we see a lot of maybe dramatics that are happening with their current relationship. So a lot of this is built on developing who these sisters are for future books. And I think that because of that, we did not get as much of a full picture of the romance with the heroine and the hero themselves in here, and that what we didn't necessarily feel satisfying. But basically we have our group of sisters who are orphaned now, and they end up being in the care of this man who is an alcoholic. He's very wealthy, and he's, you know, he owns and breeds race horses at the time, and so that's also a big theme of this, which I definitely enjoyed. So it's interesting to see them kind of get integrated into his world and how he's going to take care of them and how he tries to line up arranges and matches and marriages for them. So I really liked it. It had a great family vibe. It had a great sibling vibe. It was just good storytelling. The romance was not quite as strong as I was hoping for, but other than that, I really liked it. So 4 stars. The next book is another disappointing read for me. It's Wild and Wrangled. This is Lyla Sage's last book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. I have really enjoyed this series, but none of them have been 5 stars for me. And even though none of them have been 5 stars, I still have looked forward to every book in the series, and I've listened to it right away. I love the audiobooks. There's something about Lyla Sage's writing that is very easy to engage with for me that I really like, but also kind of leaves me a little bit unsatisfied with the way that she gets to the happily ever after. Like, I feel like on paper, I know I've said that a lot in this video, she puts in stakes in her romances that make you feel like this could be devastating. But I don't think that her writing really gets to the level where you feel that it could be devastating. It seems like she just kind of mentions it, but then everything is easily solved. And this one specifically seemed like the plot in here was weak because we have a Nepo baby, essentially, who had a baby young when she was a young teenager. She's in a forced marriage so that she can get the money from her parents to take care of her daughter. And the guy that she's supposed to marry backs out at the last minute, and so she finds herself not only without the money from mommy and daddy, big dollars, but also like without anybody to marry. And then she comes and meets her high school sweetheart, and then they kind of fall in love. So I just didn't love the relationship between these two. Of all of the books in this series, this is the most disappointing for me, but it was still 3 stars. Okay, the next book is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I go into detail about this in my reading vlog, but this was just so disappointing. I've only read one other Emily Henry book, and it is Beach Read, which I absolutely loved. I read that as soon as it came out, like 5 years ago, and gave it 5 stars. I felt like it was so romantic. It was so beautifully written. I felt like it had great emotional moments and really good lines about like being human. That's something that I really love about Emily Henry's books. This one was so disappointing because it didn't really feel fully convinced that it was going to be a romance, or it was going to be women's fiction, or if it was maybe going to be literary fiction, and it just sort of felt like a mess because it couldn't decide. And so I feel like we got some pretty lines of phrase that make you think about what it is to be human and having relationships and your one big beautiful life. And we got a little bit of a glimpse of a romance that could maybe be devastating or could maybe be like world shattering, but not like completely. And then we had this journey of our heroine as she's trying to like discover herself. So we have like these 3 moving parts of this book, and I just don't feel like any of them really worked very well. And so I gave this book 2 stars. I feel like this was just overall boring and disappointing, and it didn't really reach the levels that I would expect someone who is lauded so much for the way that she writes to reach for me. So it was just okay. 2 stars. And then I read King of Envy by Anna Huang, and let me just tell you, this is honestly, I have my favorite Anna Huang book is King of Greed, the Second Chance Romance. That's my favorite Anna Huang book. I love that book so much. And then I love Twisted Games, or is it Twisted Lies? The one with Christian. It's the last book in the Twisted series. I freaking love that book. And then I have this one, and I can't decide if I like this one more than Twisted Games, Twisted Lies. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. This one. This book was fantastic. Perfection. Anna Huang at her finest. Everything about this book had me like grinning and kicking my feet. This is exactly what I want from an Anna Huang book. I want swoony romance. I want there to be an element of danger so the hero can be very protective. I want there to be high stakes that feel high but don't feel over the top. I want it to feel like the world is going to end if this couple is not together, and that's exactly what I got here. This was so satisfying to me on every single level. I was very excited about this. I was very hyped about this, and I was not disappointed in the slightest. This is 5 stars. One of my favorite books of Anna Huang's. I absolutely adored it. I loved it so much. Can't say enough good things about it. Okay, and then the last book that I read is Something Wonderful by Judith McNaught. This is a historical romance. I read this for my Patreon book club, and the theme for the month was old school historical romance. So this was actually my first Judith McNaught, And this is an exclusive reading vlog and review on my Patreon, so I'm not going to go into detail about this here, but I will say that this book, I loved it. And this definitely makes me... This is the book that put me in my current mood for historical romance. It reignited my love for historical romance. I was so deeply impressed. I've heard a lot about Kingdom of Dreams by Judith McNaught, which I still haven't read. This is my first book from this author. I've been so nervous to start her because I feel like people either love her or hate her. I loved this book. I thought this was so good. Truly reignited my love for historical romance, and I now want to read everything else that this author has written. So I know there are some that are less loved than others, but truly, the woman is incredibly talented. And if you want my full in-depth thoughts, you will have to be a patron. But I will let you know I absolutely loved it, and I want to read more from her, and it put me in the mood big time for more historical romance. So, all right, my friends, there you have it. Those are the 12 books that I read in the month of April. I did a pretty good job of sticking to my TBR. I had 12 books on my TBR. That's my goal for this year. Only put 12 books on there. And I read 7 of them, which I think was pretty good. So yeah, the ones that I didn't get to were physical books. I did read not all of the audiobooks, most of the audiobooks. So anyway, let me know what your favorite read for the month of April was. And thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all in my next video.